Welcome home, where we provide information, inspiration, and motivator after motivator after motivator here on America's Next. I have Charity Chandler Cole with me here today. How you doing, Charity?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Cedric.
Without a doubt. I was wondering, is it okay to call you Charity Cole, or is it Charity Chandler, or is it always all three?
It's always all three.
Okay. All right. Without a doubt. How you doing today?
You know, I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. A lot better than I've been doing the last few weeks. So thank you for asking.
For sure. Without a doubt. Where you based out of?
Los Angeles, where I'm born and raised.
Wow. Now it's nice out there, isn't it?
It is nice. It's very nice right now. Let's hope hope it stays that way.
What are we talking? 99 degrees, 100 degrees?
No, I've been stuck in the house, but it's been between 85, 90 degrees lately.
Wow. Okay. Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay. Now you said you were raised there. What area of LA did you grow up in?
All over. South Central. I know they call it South LA now, but I just like to say South Central still. West LA, Compton, Carson, literally all over Los Angeles.
Wow. You know, when somebody tells me that they grew up in Los Angeles, all I can think of is John Singleton movies. Any realism to that? Was it tough for you growing up?
You know, LA was very tough, for sure. You know, I grew up kind of in a bubble. You know, my childhood was, you know, when you're a kid and you live in poverty and oppressed conditions, you really don't know that it's not normal, or that there's anything out there that's different or better. So to me, I lived a totally normal childhood up until about 10 years old when my parents got divorced. And that's when shit kind of hit the fan. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure if we can curse on here, but that's when things kind of got a little crazy for me. And I realized that the normality that I thought I had wasn't actually normal, and that growing up in Los Angeles in the time that I did was a rude awakening for me, and it wasn't as easy as the world made it seem.
Wow. At what point did the mystic veil, so to speak, begin to fall away for you?
When my parents got divorced. So my mom's from Baltimore. She came to Los Angeles to be a model, married my husband, not my husband, her husband, who was my father, who was a preacher. And my parents were really, really good at shielding us from a lot of the kind of the injustices that were happening in the world, the poverty. They, in that moment, despite the challenges they had in their marriage, they, you know, went out of their way to kind of give us the foundation we needed and shield us from a lot of the injustices we're seeing today. So when my parents decided to get divorced, I was 10 years old, and my mother got breast cancer the same year and was battling with a host of mental health issues. And so the tragedy of my parents separating and being told my mother, you know, only had a year to live was very traumatizing in and of itself. But then that's when a lot of the protection and shield we had from my parents on a united front kind of left, and we were exposed and open to the realities of the world and the harshness of the world, and not really having the protection of the adults in our lives to kind of guide us through that. And so at a very young age, you know, I had to start, you know, learning to do a lot of things to survive, which included stealing food from stores. I was the second oldest of 6 children. My parents had 6 kids back to back within an 8-year period. My dad really wanted a boy, and he had 4 girls first. So my mother ended up being a single mom raising 6 kids on her own. And shortly after the divorce and her having breast cancer, she survived the 20 extra years after beating breast cancer. But my older sister ended up going to the foster care system. First, she went to juvie, then she went to foster care. And that pattern actually continued with myself and my younger sister, because my mother didn't have the tools and resources she needed at the time, coupled with mental health, undiagnosed mental health issues to really care for us. And so as children, we just did whatever we needed to do to survive, and the consequences of doing things to survive were drastic. We were criminalized and punished for things that the community and the government should have done, had resources in place to actually help us and protect us, but instead we were punished. My mother was punished, being a Black mother, living in LA. She was punished for her condition instead of being provided the resources she needed to really thrive and succeed and help her children.
Wow.
Yeah.
You just painted a really vivid picture for me just now, and I wanna dissect a little bit of it, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Now, how did you feel when your father actually left? Did you feel that shift in energy in your household? Because it sounds like the instant your father left, everybody felt a little bit more unprotected.
Yeah, definitely. And my father didn't leave. My mother divorced my father. My father was a preacher, so he was completely against divorce. And so her divorcing him, and rightfully so, they were at that point where it was probably better for them to be apart than for us to witness a toxic relationship. But because my father didn't want to leave and he wanted to work, just stay in marriage, he resented the fact that my mother divorced him. And although he made efforts to reunify with us and be with us, the system made it so hard for him to do so that he ultimately just gave up. And so we felt that. We no longer had, I was 10 when it happened. So when it really started to hit home for us, I was becoming a preteen, a teenager. My body was going through a lot of changes. My mother was working full time. She didn't have, we were turnkey kids. She didn't have the time to really invest in us the way we needed to be invested in and protect us from boys and even teach us about, some of the scariness that existed out there growing up in puberty and a girl. So we didn't have our father, and we had that void that was missing. And so we tried to fill that void other ways, unknowingly, not realizing that was the void we were trying to fill. So we definitely felt, his presence gone in many ways. And in the many ways it manifested, we didn't even realize until we were adults, when we look back and say, wow, that was why. Yeah.
So I'm thinking, okay, you guys are basically in a capsule. You're in a capsule, a little bubble, like you said earlier, where your mother and father, they have a system, and for whatever it's worth, the system exists. But then when you get about 10 years old, that capsule is ripped apart, and then you and your brothers and sisters go into survival mode, and essentially everybody starts figuring out how to survive all at the same time.
Yeah.
And so what did this look like for your younger siblings?
For them, and what's crazy? It's funny you asked that, because no one really asked that question. And I have a younger sister who went through a whole lot as a result of not having the support she needed, essentially from us. But I think we were all trying to survive in our own ways that we didn't really focus on what each other were going through in that moment. I focused on my younger siblings from a protective point of view. So we ended up moving from the neighborhood we were in. We got Section 8 and moved to a worse neighborhood in West LA. And when we moved there, it was a gang infested neighborhood. We were presented with a proposition to either join a gang or be basically messed with every day on our way to school. And
who propositioned you that way?
The gang in the neighborhood that we moved into.
Wow.
So, and I was a straight A student. I loved school, was a good girl. And so my sister right under me and I, because there's a bunch of us, we joined the gang in an effort to protect our younger siblings. So our whole focus was on protecting them. And so we did things. And so while we weren't necessarily 100% in tune with what they were personally feeling in the moment with some of the decisions we made and some of the decisions we were forced to make, we were always doing it to protect them, knowing that if they can go to school and they could be protected and no one would mess with my younger systems, that was our goal. So through that all, I felt my siblings were so young that they didn't really understand what was going on. They didn't really grasp it the same way, because we kind of took on that role that my mother and father took on of protecting us and shielding us, that we shielded them from so much that they didn't realize the chaos they were in until we had to tell them later.
Right. And what was that like? For instance, if your mother was having medical issues and your younger siblings might just, your younger sister, your younger brother is just like in La La Land because, you know, they're a toddler or because maybe they're only 5 years old. I mean, that must have really made you have to grow up at a young age.
Definitely. We cooked for them. We would kind of come home and, you know, making dinner was, you know, coming home from school is coming home around 4 o'clock, watching Pokemon right at 4. Even though I was a gangbanger, I still loved Pokemon. So watching at 4 o'clock all the time. And then we would throw a cup of noodles or, you know, something in the microwave. We learned how to turn flour into chips and tortillas and everything. We got real creative with the food we had. So by the time my mother got home from work, there was really no dinner for her to cook because we had already took care of it. I would braid my younger sister's hair. Showers and bathing, now that I look back, wasn't really a priority. We did it when we did it. So we probably really dirty kids growing up. But we made sure that we were fed. We made sure that the house was locked, the kids were good. And I even remember having a teacher who would let me work after class for her, not realizing that I was only working because she kept a big jar of quarters under her sink, and I would steal the quarters. Like I would steal like a handful of quarters every day, and I would take it to buy a Taco Bell or take it to buy my siblings dinner. But what was interesting was that at the end of every week, the quarter jar was always refilled. So she knew I was stealing and never told on me and always refilled it so that I would always have quarters. So it was just shows you the kindness that actually exists. But yeah, we ended up, you know, just taking on a provider role for my siblings, not even realizing it because it's kind of innate for you to, as an older sibling, provide for your younger siblings. Not realizing the toll it's taking on you and how it's really stripping you of your childhood and some of the experiences you should be having.
Mm-hmm. How did y'all figure out how to make these tortillas now without nobody teaching you?
I don't know if we saw it on TV or if my mom may have done it once and we just got creative, but we would just take flour, mix it with water until we got the right consistency. We would cut little triangles and squares and make and fry them in oil. And we would sometimes we'll put butter, sometimes we'll do cinnamon and sugar, and we'll get creative and make all little kind of pastries and treats with the flour. That's all there was. You figure these out and get creative when that's all you have.
Sure. You know, I asked that because it always amazes me when I look at just the stuff that we just kind of came up with. It seems like this stuff came out of nowhere. You know, I'm inspired by that. It's like, how did y'all come up with all these things when like there was nothing happening on TV? Nobody stopped by and taught you. You guys just, something happened in your brain that just started just giving you ideas of how to survive, and you just start making a way. And I just think that's quite amazing. That's quite amazing.
Yeah, fried bologna. I don't know if you grew up eating fried bologna, but when all you have is a pan and bologna, you figure out 50 different ways to cook the bologna. So we would fry it, take the little red wrapping off, and eat it.
Take that red wrapper off. Yeah, cut it a little bit.
Make that.
Yeah, off the chain. And then I want to talk to you. You said that you were gang banging. What was that like?
It was scary. Like I said earlier, I was a good kid. I was a straight A student. I loved school. School was my solace. Reading was my escape from some of the things that really haunted me in my community. So having to gangbang or selling drugs at 14 years old, it was terrifying for me because it was something I didn't want to do. But at the same time, it gave me a sense of kind of community, having a group of people that I thought I could count on. If things got rough or if I had enemies, having enemies was just so far-fetched because it's something I never had. I was always kind of like this introvert who loved staying by herself, really didn't care to have friends. So now I had this group of people who, you know, said they loved me, said they would ride or die for me, said they would protect me. And the reality was that they didn't when you actually needed them to. So it was kind of scary being in the thick of it, but it was also kind of a rush because you just had so many experiences you've never had before. And it was just an interesting feeling, but not one I would want to have again for sure. But it was also scary. And we weren't afraid of the police necessarily, because at that age, I don't think we really grappled with consequences the way we do as adults, but we were more afraid of maybe violence in our community. So maybe dying, getting shot, getting beat up. Getting raped was a reality in our neighborhood. So those were the scary aspects of just being entrenched in that environment.
Did you all have, because I'm also thinking y'all are children of a preacher, even though he might not be in the home necessarily, but did you all have relatives Did you all have relatives checking in on you guys and seeing what was actually going on in you guys' lives?
We didn't. We didn't. No relatives whatsoever, and we questioned that when we became adults, and all of them said they didn't know what was going on. All of my relatives here on my father's side and my mother's relatives are in Baltimore. We didn't know them until later on in life. So everyone on my father's side said they didn't know, and my mother didn't really keep in communication with any of his siblings for various reasons. So, and we always questioned why. We always assumed they knew where we were, that we were in foster care, that we were in juvie, that we were struggling and suffering. But, you know, when we questioned it later, they said they didn't know any of it was happening, and they apologized.
So I know we live in a different day and age now where you can get on social media and you can take a glimpse into somebody's life. But I want to know, how do you feel when you try to have one of those closure type of conversations with one of your relatives who you know was alive and well at that time? And still much respect to them today on July 27th, 2020. But how do you feel when they say, I didn't know? How do you feel about that?
You know, I doubt it some of the times, but then I also have made a decision on my end to not dwell in it. There isn't any closure I needed from them, only because we weren't close to begin with. You know, I wasn't like, I have a strong relationship with my nieces and nephews. So if anything happened to them, I would know, I would protect them. I'm raising a nephew right now since he was 3. He'll be he's 14, will be 15 soon. So we didn't have that type of relationship. So that's why I wasn't truly invested in doing more beyond questioning why. So once they gave their response, it was enough to me, only because I didn't have really high expectations for anyone to come and save us in the first place. So having that conversation was fairly easy for me. For some of my siblings, not so easy. Some of my siblings still are very upset at the fact that no one came, no one cared, no one questioned, no one wondered, you know, where we were, what was happening to us. They wish that someone would have taken the initiative to figure out, you know, where we were. But for me personally, it's something that I have just grappled with and came to terms with on my own, and just let it be, honestly. No one's asked me that either. I have to think on that a little later.
Do you think that families need to do a better job of checking on one another and seeing what's going on with one another?
Absolutely. There's a saying, it takes a village to raise a child. And I think the whole concept, I think the whole reason why we have such a strong, thriving, not thriving as in positively, but thriving foster care system is because of the lack of family members stepping up to help, but also because there aren't services and resources that allow family members to step up and support. When you're already struggling with your own child, when you're already trying to figure out how you're going to put food on the table for your own child, when you live in oppressive conditions as a Black or brown person in Los Angeles that prevent you from getting the, you know, decent employment and housing and education, you know, the idea of taking someone else in is unconscionable sometimes. Is how can I, you know, I'm already feeling, there's feelings of I'm already failing my child. How dare I try to fail another child when there's a system that exists that they say will help them, that they say will, you know, make sure they have the resources, that say they'll provide scholarships and opportunities when they go to college. So there's this mindset within our communities that foster care is the better answer and solution, because of the conditions and circumstances we're already faced with. So I do see why a lot of relatives don't take their other children in, because they're ill-equipped. But there needs to be a shift in how we make sure that relatives are supported to take in the children, because children are better off with relatives, better off with their parents first, who can be provided resources to support them, and if not the parent, then the relative, because otherwise being around strangers is hella scary. So if we can, you know, use all the millions and billions of dollars that we're putting into a failed foster care system and invest it in the actual parents and the relatives, then we'll get somewhere. But that's where we've missed the mark terribly.
Sure. You know, I was going to ask you, but you went into it. To what extent do we need to express to the community that, you know, you all need to change your paradigm about one another? It's not okay for you to have cousins, aunties, uncles, and little cousins out here that you're not checking on, just because, you know, you're dealing with your piece of the world. I understand you're dealing with your piece of the world, but quite honestly, we got so many churches in our neighborhood. A lot of our people have been affiliated with one of them. And inside of that church, they're telling you to step out on faith. Inside of that church, they're telling you that you might not be able to see a way, but the universe and that village will help you to make a way. So at what point do we start really saying, you know what? Hey, I need to be accountable for other members of my family.
Mm-hmm. Well, one, is that being preached in churches? I've never heard that preached in my church. I love my pastor in my church, but I don't hear us talking about that. So I think if we start
I said it. No. I know. I just said that on America's Next Motivator. But what I said happens in church is that they talk about the concept of faith. So while so many of our family members are going to church, and at the same time that they're going to church, they're not checking on their cousins who live in the same city as them, or their little nieces and nephews that live in the same city as them. At what point do we change the paradigm to say, hey, I know that it's going to be a challenge for me to take on all my little cousins, two of my little cousins, because I have my cousins not listening. But at what point do I say I'm going to step out on faith and see if I can take care of mine?
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. That if you're the population of people you're talking about are people that go to church, I think that conversation needs to first be had at the church, so that those that are in the church can then get that word, get that message. Oftentimes, and I'm born and raised in the church, I'm a Christian, very spiritual, love the Lord. But I think the messaging we get at church oftentimes is about how do we help ourselves? What do we need to do to become God-like? What do we need to do to be better people? What do we need to do so that we are okay? But there's never a discussion or preaching about how helping ourselves individually needs to manifest ultimately in how we interact with others, how we help our families, how we help the community. I haven't personally heard that discussion. So I think that and it's going to take our preachers, our educators, our the grandmothers in the village, the older folks to come in and say, hey, while part of working on yourself, part of your healing process while you're getting through that may actually be helping your nephew or helping, your community or helping your sister or helping your brother. I tell, even activists, I don't know if there's people on this watching now who are activists or advocates and fighting for issues and causes. Something I told my family recently was, how dare I? I have family members that are struggling, that are going through the very issues I fight for every day. How dare I walk about this earth advocating for issues I care about, fighting for the next person when I have a sister right here that's dealing with it, when I have a cousin that's dealing with it. So if you can't help your family first, if you can't, use the skills, the resources, the knowledge and education you have to help the people next to you, but you're helping the rest of the world and you're doing it on social media and other platforms, then you're really doing a huge injustice. So, my call to action would be for everyone watching to say, hey, who's that person I have in my family, in my community that I could reach out to? And it doesn't take having degrees. It doesn't take having all of the education and the resources needed, but it takes, for one, is acknowledging the simple action of, I see you. I see what you're going through. I feel your pain. I'm not going to judge you. What do you need? Do you want to talk? Those simple actions alone can, really allow, trigger someone to want to do better, want to do more, want to feel as if they're worth something and that there are people out there that give a damn about them. So really being intentional on how we communicate that to the church, how we communicate that to the public, so that they know. A lot of folks don't even realize they can do it regardless of status, regardless of where they are in the world, because they're so, involved in all the things they're dealing with, the burdens they're dealing with, that they don't have, rightfully so, they don't have time to even think about it, because it's something that's not discussed. So why would they? Why would they?
But see, this is what I was getting at. About 5 minutes ago, you were saying that we don't check on each other enough, because I'd asked you if people were checking on you in your life. You said no, right? And then you were talking about the way that we don't check on each other so much that we have a busy, bustling foster care system with almost 500,000 kids in it. So then my mind went here. We need to change the paradigm, because it's not like all 400,000 kids in the foster care system. It's not like their family members have never heard of some of the tenets that they need to take on. They've heard about faith. They've heard about resiliency. They've heard about the village. Everybody's heard about the village, right? And if you haven't, somewhere in your work life, you've learned about the importance of teamwork, pulling other people with you. It's not an I thing, it's a we thing. So my thing is, when do we start taking these concepts that we're learning out there in the world and applying them to our family? You know, whether you go to church or not, it's not all about church. It's about when you say, I can't reach out and check on my family over there because I'm dealing with what I'm dealing with. Yeah. At what point do we change that? You see what I'm saying? I can't say,
the second when you hear it, the second when you're like, oh crap, I knew deep down inside I should be doing that, but I needed that reminder. You know, if you're watching now, like this is the reminder that it needs to be done. You know, we need to check on each other. Sometimes we're all we have. And the reason why our, you know, criminal justice system, our foster care system is thriving is because it knows that that's not occurring in our families and our communities. They know we're not being checked on. They know no one's going to come and advocate for this child. So we need to do it now. We need to do it as of yesterday.
Right. And see, and so then when you say thriving, you don't mean that everything is going great. You mean thriving as in you constantly have an influx of young people entering into the foster care system.
Exactly. And profiting off of us.
Yes. We have a powerful point. We have a comment from the audience. Yolanda Riley says, we need to work on preventing kids from entering foster care by starting programs that focus on building families instead of creating silos. Absolutely. What do you think about that?
100%. There needs to be alternatives to the foster care system. I'm working on that right now. I'm an LA County Commissioner for Children and Families, and we are working wholeheartedly. I introduced that recently. I'm an abolitionist. I don't believe in reforming systems that were never meant and built to protect us. So prevention means, you know, so we're actually, you know, going to be working on reviewing all the cases where children were put into the foster care system as a result of punishment for being poor, you know, not abused, but punishment for being poor, are, you know, cases where, you know, adoptions were fast tracked because oftentimes a lot of kids are, you know, sent off to be adopted because the idea is that white people can take better care of our Black children because Black mothers apparently to some don't have it together. So if we were to look at the reasons why children enter the foster care system and say, what can we do to prevent these things from occurring? And we took that lens and said, hey, for me, for instance, I went to jail in the foster care system because I was poor, because I was stealing underwear and food. And instead of someone saying, hey, let's call her mom and figure out what's going on in the home to cause her to steal underwear or food, let's use the millions and billions of dollars that we're using to punish them, to incarcerate them, to criminalize them, and give this mother some food, give this mother some clothes for her children, and help, you know, restore and rehabilitate the family instead of punish them, then there would be no need for the foster care system in that respect. But instead of doing that, we said, hey, you know, and mind you, there's data that shows where they test children, where they show that if by the third grade, I'm not at a specific reading level, that they're going to plan to, you know, okay, sorry guys, my children.
It's okay.
Hi, you know, I'm supposed to okay. So, you know, there's tests and projects that are being done where they're testing children, you know, if we don't reach a certain reading level by a certain time, that's incentive for them to start building new prisons and start, you know, putting more resources into the foster care system. So it's all intentional. We're not doing popcorn now. I'm on the phone. Remember, we're not. You know, it's all intentional. They don't want us to succeed because there's so many organizations. There's so many people that profit off of our demise, off of our organization. That's not the goal. So once we make that the goal, a lot of people will lose a lot of money as a result of it. So yes, if we actually did our jobs and looked at, you know, the reasons that cause poverty, that cause criminalization, and we started to fix that, I 100% guarantee you that those conditions won't exist because they don't exist in other communities, do they? They exist in our community.
Well, to be fair, people from all different communities entering the foster care system, but I'm on the same side with you in terms of there being a disproportionate amount of Black and brown people in foster care. And because it really starts at home, the reason why so many Black and brown people is in foster care stems from an issue that's in home. There's an insidious problem there. And based out of this conversation, I don't think that we know how to be family. And I know all does not apply to every, so I'm not talking about everybody, but I think that in a good number of families across the world, we're not being family. Would you agree with that?
I would say it varies. I think the way society has intentionally dismantled families, the way our systems and institutions have intentionally dismantled families is why we don't always treat each other as family and as the way we should. We're kind of raised in a sense to compete with each other for very scarce resources, which results in how we really treat each other within our family. And if we weren't in constant competition with each other because society has forced that on us, if we weren't constantly trying to be the one child out of 6 who's the token child, who's going to be the one that's going to, have it together and get it together, if we weren't constantly, trying to not only prove our worth in this world, but then we have every excuse and every reason to not succeed, mind you, which is always going to be the easier option because no one expects us to grow up and be anything. No one expects us to be the next doctor or lawyer. Society has already written us off. So we have that against us and the constant need to compete against each other. So I see why that family dynamic isn't as strong as it needs to be, but that can change. We can change that. We just have to figure out make the how and making sure the right, systems and structures are in place that cultivate that. Because right now, name any system, and I can tell you how it intentionally destroys our families, our Black and brown families. I'm gonna be specific in saying that. It's definitely other families as well, but it's very intentional.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so if you could tell our families across the world 2 things that they need to do right now that they might not have been doing or that they've been doing, but we want to highlight it today. What are 2 things that our families could begin to do in order to be stronger entities?
I would say 1, parents, don't be afraid to be intimate with your children. And by intimate, I say, tell them you love them, tell them they're special, they're worthy, give them a hug, give them a kiss. I see that a lot of our families, there's not those intimate, forms of communication. They're missing from a lot of our households for various reasons. So tell your child you love them, give them that hug, that passionate, I love you, you're worthy, you're my life type of hug and kiss. Because we don't always do that with our children. And don't be afraid to do it. Don't be afraid to show vulnerability because children need to see that. But then also encourage each other, motivate each other. Don't be so inclined to be in competition with each other. I was raised to be in competition with my siblings. I had to be the first one to graduate college. I had to be the first one to get my master's degree. I had to be the first one to make 6 figures. And while I was so obsessed with doing that, I wasn't helping them along the way. I wasn't showing them how to do it with me because I had to be the one to do it. And it bothers my soul to this day. And so looking back now, I'm trying to, make up for that and make sure they have all the tools and resources and knowledge and know how to do what I did. But also realizing that everybody's not the same in their approach. Everyone's not going to attack the situation the same way, but we're so, we're always competing with each other. So I would say, take your sister up with you, take your brother with you, succeed together. It's okay. There's room for all of us to succeed and get out of that mentality that it only has to be you, that you have to be that gold token, that gold ticket in your community or in your household, because we can all succeed together. We'll all be better when we do succeed together.
Absolutely. Charity Cole, we're getting ready. Charity Chandler Cole, we're getting ready to take a brief break. It's going to be about 15 seconds. I'm loving this conversation, and you're bringing that fire. We're going to be right back, okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. America's Next Motivator. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern. Tuesday and Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern. America's Next Motivator. Hosted by me, Cedric Riley, and sponsored by the Pride Empowerment Network. And we're back. Charity, you made me have an internal combustion when you started talking about our families and the way that, we are essentially feeding a system that is profiting off of our separation. And so you know, I'm all about figuring out how we can make our families a stronger thing. What you might not know about me is that I also grew up in the foster care system. I spent 8.5 years of my life in foster care. Me and my brothers and sisters, we also were in survival mode for a few years before we went into the foster care system. So I have a lot of things in common with you. And I'm extremely passionate about making our families stronger so that they don't continue to get torn apart. So I'm right there with you 1000% with the things that you're saying. Now, you mentioned that you are an abolitionist. I love it that you made that comment, and I want you to explain what you mean by that.
What I mean is that I think our criminal justice system needs to be abolished. I think our foster care system needs to be abolished. I think every system put in place to oppress people needs to be abolished, because systems that were created without the intention of actually protecting cannot be reformed. When systems exist to oppress, to marginalize, to incarcerate, to enslave, cannot be reformed. It's impossible. You need to start over. You need to figure out, you need to reimagine new systems, new solutions. We don't even need systems. We don't need institutions. We need to reimagine solutions that actually restore and not criminalize. Mm-hmm. And if foster care is a form of criminalization, you're criminalized because you're criminalizing the youth for their status. And then when they leave the foster care system, you're not giving them the tools to survive. And majority of our prison system is comprised of current and former foster youth. So you're essentially setting them up for failure.
Yep. I want to take a brief second before we get into this next segment deeply. I want you to talk to a young woman out there who she's in a foster care system. She's 19 years old. She's still in foster care, and she's trying to figure out a way forward in her life. I want you to take 1 minute, and I want you to speak to her, please.
Well, one, you're beautiful. You're worthy. I say now's your moment to prove the world wrong. Now's your moment, regardless of what anyone told you you're capable of doing, is to go out there and prove the world wrong. The crazy thing about being 19, when I was 19, that's when I came into my realization that everything I was ever told was a lie. I realized that I was beautiful. I realized I was worthy. I realized I was capable of my wildest dreams. So I say go after everything they said you couldn't have. Don't wait to create a plan for how to do it. Just jump right in and learn along the way. There's no limit to your brilliance. There's no limit to what you're capable of achieving. And you have a system. You have a sisterhood. I'm your sister. If you're in the foster care system, I'm your sister. You have people that want you to succeed, that will help you to succeed. And now is your time to lean on us for support. We're here for you. You have a whole community, but it's not over. There's nothing that you've done that makes you incapable or unworthy of succeeding and doing whatever you want. And you define what success is. No one else gets to define what that is. Success could be happiness. Success could be finishing something. It could be finishing your high school diploma. It could be anything. You determine your worth. You determine your destiny, and you go after it and prove people wrong.
Wow. Powerful. Very powerful. How old were you when you went into foster care?
I was 15 and a half, 16.
Okay. And then I want to know, how did it feel for you to have this breakthrough in your life where you're getting out onto the other side of things? You're figuring out how to make some money. You're getting into rooms where most people are positive. Everybody is educated. And then coming back to, let's say, a family reunion, or coming back to visit your family and saying, hey, y'all, let's all get on the same page. And that being a challenge. How do you feel about that?
Yeah. Going into those rooms was very intimidating for me. I would always, so just to give you some context, I was of the mindset where I kind of just said, F everybody, I'm going to do and be whatever I want. So when I turned 18, I went to trade school. I got pregnant right away, went to trade school, ended up not getting a job in that field, and applied for a job at City Financial as a senior branch account executive. Was not experienced that whatsoever, had no experience working in a bank, but I went to interview. 18 years old, and walks this very, very old white guy to interview me. He was the regional director, and he's 2 positions above the position that would have interviewed me. He happened to be in the area, and the other folks were gone, so he interviewed me. So when he walked in, I was like, oh crap, I'm not going to get this job. So I was no longer afraid to interview, and I just interviewed regularly. And he asked me a question. He said, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I said, well, hey, you look like you're going to die soon. I'm going to take your job. And he said, you're hired. And so they were looking for someone that wanted to move up in the company and wasn't afraid to tell their boss that. I had no idea that's what they wanted. They hired me on the spot. I ended up being the most profitable employee at the age of 18, got promoted at the age of 19 to branch account manager. And from there, I started to go to college while I was working full time. That experience gave me so much confidence and told me that I do not need to ask permission to be in any space. Hell, I don't even need to qualify all the way, as long as I know how to learn the ropes along the way and do it successfully. And that's something I proved to myself. But then after I started to step into rooms, into doors with people that were very successful, I was very intimidated, because at the end of the day, I was always reminded that I was still a young Black woman. I still wasn't good enough. There were challenges I was facing with internally, where I assumed people were looking at me that a certain way or thinking of me a certain way. So it was very challenging. But then when I was with my family, for some reason, I had this overpowering confidence, because I was now that gold star we talked about earlier. I was better than everyone else, and I felt damn good about it. And so in the beginning, it wasn't me coming in and trying to help anyone. And I'm just going to be very honest and transparent, because my mind wasn't on that path. My mind wasn't, I just need to be better. I need to be good. I wasn't the full on activist and an advocate that I am now, where I'm bringing people up and uplifting people. It was, let me just not even show off who I am or what I have. Let me just show up, make an appearance, and then leave. There wasn't an emphasis on me and family, because I didn't have family. After experiencing the foster care and criminal justice system, I didn't have love for people. Family meant nothing to me. Okay. You know, I was stripped from my family. My family didn't come to get me. So there was no connection to my family. But now that there is, you know, being successful now, you know, all I do is try to pour into my family, try to give them what I have and give them that information. But it did take me getting to a certain point in my life for them to finally listen. You know, getting a degree wasn't enough. You know, getting a certain job wasn't enough. So as I started to be more and more successful, that's when my family started to say, oh, let me listen now. That's where we are. Yeah.
Wow. I was going to ask, what is it that was the turning point for you that changed you from somebody who was just deep in survival mode? Because that's what I hear. You were like, no, I'm getting ready to make my life into a better thing, no matter who, no matter what, no matter how. And then when you look up and you see everybody else there, it's like, no, I'm not getting ready to spend not one moment with you. I'm getting ready to keep on working. At what point did you start to realize the value in extending your arms to your family members who are right there with you, who weren't having the same experience?
Yeah. Well, I'm still in survival mode. I'm in a constant state of trying to survive. But when I realized that, you know, I want to start my own business and I want to hire my family, I want to hire people that look like me, but them not having the skills needed to do the job, was when I was, shame on me for not bringing them up with me. Shame on me for not giving them the resources and tools. And then also when I realized that the people I was surrounded by did not look like me, and that I could have easily shared that knowledge and shared that experience without trying to keep it all to myself. You know, there's this saying, you know, crabs in a barrel, right? They use it all the time with Black folks, right? Crabs in a barrel, we just kind of, you know, snatch each other down and everyone's trying to make it to the top. And so I kind of reframed that to think that crabs' natural environment isn't a bucket, right? So if crabs are put in an environment that they naturally do not thrive in, and they're trying to climb on top of each other to survive, then we're going to be in a position where we're going to have Black on Black crime, we're going to have brown on brown crime, or white on white crime, that we're going to have conditions that are oppressive and people constantly trying to compete to survive. So when we change the conditions that we're in and we stabilize the conditions, where everyone has an opportunity for education, everyone has access to healthcare, everyone has resources and jobs and are able to thrive, you're no longer going to see the need to compete. You're no longer going to see Black on Black violence and crime. You're no longer going to see brown on brown violence, white, whatever, etc. We are currently living in a bucket with oppressed conditions that are natural for our environment, are natural for our survival, and are natural for us to thrive. So the moment we realize that, that's when we say whatever we do have, those of us that are successful, whatever that means to you, how do we share that happiness? How do we spread that happiness? How do we mentally take ourselves out of that bucket so that we can then reach over and pull our family out, pull our friends out, and pull our community out? Because we are literally in a theoretical bucket that's not allowing us to do that until we mentally check out of that.
What are your thoughts about family members who say, I'm doing my own thing, I don't want to work with you?
Mm-hmm. You mean work with me personally?
Well,
I encourage. If you have family members who are doing their own thing and it's benefiting them positively, there is no one way to be successful. There's no one way that works for you. Everyone's goal should be happiness at the end of the day. And what makes you happy, you determine. What makes you successful, you determine. So just because something worked for charity, I am not the poster child for every person in foster care being successful. I'm saying this is what I did to apply to myself to be successful. It does not mean it's going to work for you. But as your brother, as your sister, I will help you, understanding that I won't have all the answers, but I'll go on that journey with you because I love you and I want you to succeed. And that's where we fail, is that those of us that become successful think we have all the answers and that we can just apply it to the next person. And when they don't latch on the way we feel they should latch on, we say, oh, they don't really want it, or they don't really want to be successful as soon as I'm done. And that's not fair. That's not fair. Or they don't want to join my credit repair service or sell my tea. You don't really want to be successful. And that's where we get it wrong. So I think that if that next person has a plan on how they're going to gain their happiness and achieve their happiness, then root them on. Thank you. You got it. Let me know if there's any way I can support you. Mind you, maybe you can share something with me. And that's what we don't do. We have this, I have all the answers mentality, and that's not fair.
Right. Yeah. Yep. I believe everybody has something to contribute as the mind of our family. I see like the family as a collective is like a brain. Like we're like a brain. When we're all together, we're like a brain. And at some point, we have to realize that us as a collective is exponentially more powerful than me as an individual.
Yeah.
And so, I believe that we've got to reach beyond our own perspectives and realize that I can be great and you can be great.
Yeah.
And guess what? Hey, you might be better than me in some areas, right? Yes. But I have strengths too.
Yes.
And what we both need to realize is that we are better together than we are divided.
Exactly.
And I'm interested in how do we get people to see that you all are better as a collective than you are as an individual. Because see, I don't think that the family gains much of anything when you get one star, you get one exception, you get one celebrity, one that is not effectively reaching back and working with everybody else. I don't think we really get much out of that. I think that our true value comes from us being a collective effort. You know what I mean? I'm inspired when I see 8 people living in a household and all of them are grown and all of them, they might be waiters, they might be waitresses, and they put their paychecks together and then they buy each of them a home or they start each of them a business. I'm inspired by that. I don't want to be the one person with the high profile career with, the $1 million and the celebrity status. I don't want to be the one person. I would rather be a regular person right next to you than to be an eagle out there soaring alone.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So that's enough. I think people can go back on this episode and they can get some good ideas about what families need to do. Now, as far as the foster care system needing to be a totally new thing, do you think that partner organizations are a key to helping the foster care system transition into a better thing?
I think partnering organizations could exist to help provide some of the services needed to the families. I don't think government should be running families at all.
Right.
I think our community-based organizations should be the ones receiving all of the funding to invest and pour into our communities so that if there is a problem at home, children that are being abused definitely should be removed. And there should be other options that are conducive to their well-being, to their success, to their outcomes, where they should be placed, either permanently or temporarily, depending on the situation. But these villages need to exist and actually cultivate them to be successful and to be healed and to be restored. That's not what we have. But as far as the community-based organizations, for the cases we have that aren't abusive situations, the children should remain in the home, and the resources need to be poured into the family. How do I help the family? How do I help the child? What's lacking? So 100% that should happen, but I don't think the community-based organizations need to partner with the system to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Too much room for error.
Right. Okay. And I hear you. It's just that I was also in a conversation a few days ago with somebody who said that it will be next to impossible to actually remove the system because there's so many thousands of entanglements that are happening realistically. And so, with all due respect to everybody, even though I agree that the actual roots of the foster care system need to be removed and we need to stop and we need to pivot, right? There's also the reality that we've got thousands of kids going into foster care every day. And so in order for us to really be effective change makers, we have to really have a transitional plan. And to me, that's where partnering agencies can come in. And yes, I do agree with you that in the future, funding should go directly to community organizations who they might know Tammy down the street who's having an issue. They might know Thomas, the single father. They might know Janice and Robert, the nuclear family that needs a few $100s to be okay.
Yeah,
I agree with you there. What would you suggest to somebody who's working in the foster care industry right now and they want to be a part of the solution, not the problem? What would you suggest to them?
I would say educate yourself on the history of foster care in wherever your respective region is. Really focus on the emphasis of how the war on drugs specifically impacted the foster care system. Look at racism in foster care system and helping to root out racist practices and policies that exist that punish parents, punish children, that allows for such a disproportionate rate of Black and brown children in the foster care system. Once you have and you're equipped with that information and that knowledge, then you will be able to truly advocate for what needs to happen in the foster care system to really change it. What we have now are a lot of folks coming in with solutions without having the context and the history and the education behind why it needs to happen. And that's why nothing ever happens. So something we're doing in LA County is we're going to have a whole history lesson on the foster care system in LA County, the racist roots it's tied to, the policies that exist that allow for it to occur in the way that it's occurring. And we're going to uproot those practices and policies that allow for such a destruction of our families. I would say educate yourself. Stop waiting for people to give you the answer. What you're being taught in the child welfare system you're not going to find the answers there. You're going to have to get your answers elsewhere because that education is not going to exist in the way it needs to be. And then speak to the children. Speak to the children and the families that are being impacted and ask them what would have changed their circumstances. How could have the system approached it differently in a way that would have restored them? I guarantee you that no one asked them what they needed. They asked them why it happened. What did you do? Or this is what you did wrong. But not what could we help you with? What could we support you with?
Powerful, powerful, powerful discussion by you today. If somebody wants to follow up with you, where can they email you?
I can be emailed at chandlercharity@yahoo.com.
Okay.
I'm on Instagram at charity4president. And I don't accept Facebook friend requests, so just go on Instagram.
Okay. Hey, you running for president one day?
I'm president and CEO of my organization, Transformative Management Solutions.
Okay. All right. I'm like, listen, where's the ballot?
When I did that handle, I knew I wanted to be president of something. I wasn't president of anything just yet, but now I'm president of many organizations. So it manifested in its own magical way.
Sure. We got about 2.5 minutes left, and I need you to answer 3 questions in that time.
Okay.
What is survival to you?
Ooh. Survival is being happy while proving people wrong in the process. That's what it is for me personally.
Okay. And what is success to you?
Success is happiness.
All right. And what would you say to
I want to expand on that. And happiness is satisfaction in what you have.
There you go. Okay. And what is greatness to you?
Greatness is overcoming barriers, going above and beyond what you expected of yourself, not what others expected of you. And greatness is satisfaction in that you accomplished whatever it is that you set out to accomplish.
Sure. You know, Charity, I want to let you know that you caught my eye a while ago. And lo and behold, you're a very dynamic person. You're a very powerful person. Your work is great. Your life journey has been inspiring. You have my respect. I want to let you know that I see you. I want to let you know that I commend you and that you are one of America's next motivators.
Thank you, Cedric. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate this.
Without a doubt. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll talk later, okay?
Thank you.
Sure. Bye. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Another installment of America's Next Motivator. Hey, I know there's some small things that happen here, and you say, hey, why doesn't Cedric change that? Like the way my head is always in the camera. Listen, I'm trying to keep it simple and do a good job. Tune in here, America's Next Motivator, day after day after day for a quality discussion about where we've been, where we're going, and what's next. There's something here for you. Stop by and pick it up.